"That," said a new voice, "is precisely why you needed us." A hologram flickered to life between Ilara and the war machine. Admiral Rice, standing as if she were physically present in the chamber. "First Minister," Rice continued, "humanity withdrew from galactic society because we recognized what we were capable of, what we are. We are warriors, builders of weapons, architects of destruction. It is in our nature, a nature that nearly destroyed us and did destroy others." The Admiral's expression softened slightly. "But we also protect. We shield. We preserve. When Earth signed the treaty, we knew that someday, somewhere, a species that had chosen peace would face an enemy that had chosen war. And when that day came, only those who understood war could hope to stop it." Around them, the sounds of fighting were already growing more distant as the human war machines systematically cleared the city of invaders. "The Vecran horde has destroyed 17 worlds before yours," Rice said. "They will destroy no more. Once your planet is secure, the fleet will track them to their point of origin and ensure they never threaten another civilization again." "You would do this for us?" Ilara asked. "For species you have had no contact with for centuries." "We do this because we must," Rice replied. "Because it is what we are good at, and because by protecting those who cannot protect themselves, perhaps we atone, in some small way, for our past." 3 hours later, as promised, the last of the Vecran forces on Astari Prime had been eliminated. The human war machines, the Sentinels, as they called themselves, stood guard throughout the devastated city as the shocked Astari population began to emerge from hiding. Ilara, accompanied by Sentinel Unit Delta 7, was transported to the human command ship in orbit. The vessel was enormous, a city in space dedicated entirely to war. As she was escorted through its corridors, she saw humans working alongside machines, some fully robotic like her Sentinel escort, others seeming to blend the line between human and machine, cyborgs with mechanical limbs and implanted interfaces. Admiral Rice was waiting in a conference room that had been adjusted for Astari comfort. The lighting dimmed to suit their sensitive eyes, the temperature raised to match their homeworld's climate. "Your world is secure, First Minister," Rice said without preamble. "The Vecran have been driven from this system. Our medical ships will arrive within the day to assist with your wounded." "Admiral," Ilara said, "I don't know how to express our gratitude, but I must ask, what happens now? Will humanity rejoin galactic society?" Rice shook her head. "No. We remain behind our borders, as the treaty demands. What you have seen today, our weapons, our technology, this is the result of 2 centuries focused on a single purpose: defense. If released into the wider galaxy, it would upset the balance of power in ways too dangerous to contemplate. Then why show it to us at all?" "Because you needed to see it," Rice said simply. "The galaxy needs to remember what humanity is. What we can do. It keeps the peace." "Through fear?" Ilara asked, dismayed. "Through deterrence," Rice corrected. "The emergency beacons we provided to the treaty signatories ensure that any species facing extinction can call for our aid. But they also serve as a reminder to potential aggressors that there are consequences to genocidal actions." Ilara considered this. "And the Vecran? What will happen to them?" "As I said, we will track them to their origin point. If they can be reasoned with, we will establish terms for their continued existence. If not..." She didn't need to finish the sentence. "Is that justice?" Ilara asked softly. "Or vengeance?" Rice's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes, something ancient and weary. "That, First Minister, is humanity. We protect what we care for. Throughout our history, we have been capable of both tremendous compassion and terrible violence. We recognized long ago that the galaxy might be better off without our contradictions." She gestured to a view screen that showed the devastated but now secure city below. Astari were beginning to rebuild already, with Sentinel units assisting in moving heavy debris. "But sometimes," Rice continued, Terrible violence is the only answer to terrible violence. And on those days you call us. In the months that followed, the galaxy changed. News of what had happened at Astari Prime spread quickly. The story of how humanity had emerged from isolation to destroy an enemy that had seemed unstoppable became the stuff of legend. Other species that had been threatened by the Vecran received their own emergency beacons. The borders of Earth remained closed, but diplomatic channels were established. Careful, limited, but open nonetheless. The space battle will be concluded within the hour. Rise replied matter-of-factly. Ground forces have been deployed to eliminate any hostiles on the surface. We request that all Astari civilians remain in secure locations until the operation is complete. Ground forces, Varric interjected. You've landed troops already. Something almost like a smile flickered across Admiral Rice's face. Not troops, Coordinator Varric. Something far more efficient. Steel and mercy. The first indication that something had changed came when the building stopped shaking. For days, the constant bombardment from Vecran forces had created a background vibration that the Astari had almost grown accustomed to. When it suddenly ceased, the silence was almost as startling as the explosions had been. "What's happening?" Ilara asked, looking around at her exhausted council members. Before anyone could answer, a new sound emerged, a rhythmic, heavy thudding that seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. It grew louder, closer, until it was directly overhead. Then the roof exploded inward. Council members scattered as chunks of crystal and metal rained down. Ilara was thrown to the ground by Varric, who covered her body with his own. When she managed to look up, sunlight was streaming through a massive hole in what had once been the impenetrable dome of the central council chamber, and something was descending through that hole. At first, Ilara thought it was a ship, some kind of human landing craft, but as it lowered into the chamber, suspended on jets of blue flame, she realized it was something else entirely. It was a machine, but shaped like a humanoid figure, a massive metal giant that stood at least 7 meters tall. Its surface was matte black, absorbing the light rather than reflecting it, with occasional lines of red energy pulsing beneath its armor plating. Its head was featureless except for a single horizontal band of glowing red that presumably housed its sensors. The machine touched down on the council chamber floor with surprising delicacy for something of its size. As the roar of its thrusters died away, Ilara could hear more thudding in the distance, dozens, perhaps hundreds of similar impacts across the city. Astari leadership secured, the machine announced, its voice a deeper, more mechanical version of Admiral Rice's. Designate. First Minister Ilara identified. Initiating protection protocols. Before Ilara could respond, the chamber's remaining doors burst inward. Vecran soldiers poured through, 8-limbed insectoid creatures wielding plasma cutters and projectile weapons. They skittered across the walls and ceiling with unnatural speed, chittering in their unknowable language. The human war machine turned to face them, moving with a fluid grace that seemed impossible for something of its size. Its arm, if you could call the massive weapon assembly an arm, raised toward the oncoming Vecran. What happened next was both terrible and awe-inspiring. The machine didn't just fight the Vecran, it eradicated them. Precision beams of energy cut through the alien invaders with surgical accuracy. When they adapted and tried to swarm the machine from multiple directions, compartments in its shoulders opened to release swarms of small drones that intercepted the Vecran in mid-leap. Within moments, the chamber was secure. Not a single Astari had been harmed. The machine turned back to Ilara, who stood trembling not from fear, but from the sheer force of what she had just witnessed. First Minister, the machine said, "I am Sentinel Unit Delta 7, assigned to your personal protection. Admiral Rice requests your presence aboard the command vessel once the ground operation is complete. Estimated time, 3 hours. 3 hours, Varric said incredulously, to clear an entire planet of Vecran. The machine's glowing sensor band seemed to focus on him. Current deployment. 10,000 Sentinel units, 50,000 hunter-seeker drones, 5,000 orbital strike platforms. Vecran ground forces estimated at 30,000. Threat elimination proceeding at optimal efficiency. From outside the building came the sounds of battle, if battle was even the right word for such a one-sided conflict. Occasional flashes of light illuminated the chamber as energy weapons discharged in the streets below. "Why?" Ilara finally asked, finding her voice. "Why would you help us? After 2 centuries of isolation." The machine was silent for a moment, as though consulting some internal protocol. "The Treaty of Soul, Article 7, it finally said. In the event of imminent extinction-level threat to any signatory species, Earth reserves the right to intervene with appropriate force." The Asteri were signatories. The beacon was authenticated. Response was mandatory. "But such force," Ilara said, gesturing to the machine and the destruction it had wrought. "We are a peaceful species. We have never seen anything like this." The call and the response. The Asteri had always been known as the peacekeepers of the Orion Arm. Their tall, slender bodies housed minds that had solved equations that baffled other species for centuries. Their 6-fingered hands had crafted music that could bring tears to the eyes of even the most stoic warrior races. Their cities, built of crystal and living metal, were beacons of civilization that could be seen from orbit, monuments to cooperation rather than conquest. For 3,000 years, they had maintained their neutrality. Their diplomatic courts had mediated hundreds of interstellar conflicts. Their medical teams had cured plagues on dozens of worlds. Their scientists had freely shared technology that lifted entire species from primitive conditions to spacefaring civilizations. The Asteri had no warships. They had no standing army. They had no weapons beyond what their planetary security forces needed to maintain order. And that was why they were dying. First Minister Ilara stood at the observation dome of the Central Council chamber on Astari Prime, watching as another section of the capital city erupted in flames. Her silver skin reflected the orange glow of the fires below, and her large, almond-shaped eyes, evolved for the dim light of their homeworld, squinted against the harsh brightness of destruction. "How many ships remain in orbit?" she asked, her voice calm despite the tremor in her 4-jointed limbs. "None, First Minister," replied Defense Coordinator Varric. "The last transport left with the children an hour ago. The Vecran destroyed it before it could reach the jump point." Ilara closed her eyes briefly. 2,000 children. Gone. Just like that. And our distress calls. No response from the Zelvan Confederacy or the Miktari Republic. Varric said. "They've blockaded their borders. They won't risk the Vecran turning on them next." The Vecran horde had appeared at the edge of known space 18 standard months ago. No one knew where they had come from or what they wanted. They didn't communicate. They didn't negotiate. They simply arrived, consumed, and moved on. 17 worlds had already fallen to them. Asteri Prime would be the 18th. "What about the restricted frequencies?" Ilara asked carefully. Varric's expression shifted to one of alarm. "First Minister, you can't be suggesting." "I am." Ilara turned from the window. "The emergency beacon. It's time." But that signal, it would reach beyond the treaty boundaries. It could reach Earth. Earth. Even the name sent a chill through the council chamber. Humanity had not been seen in galactic society for over 2 centuries, not since the Purge Wars. Their exile had been self-imposed, a retreat behind treaty lines after demonstrating what their species was capable of when pushed to extremes. "If the stories about the humans are even half true," Ilara said, "they might be our only hope." "If the stories are true," Varric countered, "calling them might be worse than the Vecran." A massive explosion rocked the building, sending cracks spiderwebbing across the crystalline dome above them. The Vecran ground forces were inside the city perimeter now. "We have nothing left to lose," Ilara said. "Activate the beacon." Deep in the most secure vault beneath the central council chamber, a device that had not been touched for 200 years hummed to life. It was small, unassuming, a simple cylinder of dull gray metal with a single button. The Asteri had received it from humanity's representatives just before the Treaty of Sol was signed, when Earth closed its borders to the galaxy. "If you ever face extinction," the human ambassador had said, "and we mean true extinction, press this. We will come." The beacon sent out a signal unlike any other communication in the galaxy. It bypassed the standard communication relays, traveling through a dimension that the Asteri scientists had never fully understood. The signal contained no words, no video, just a simple code, coordinates, a species identifier, and a classification of threat. Ilara didn't know if anyone would receive it. The humans might have abandoned the beacons long ago. They might have evolved beyond caring about other species. They might have destroyed themselves with their own warlike tendencies. But it was all they had left. For 3 days, the Asteri central government held out in their fortified chamber as the Vecron methodically destroyed their world around them. The alien invaders were insectoid in appearance, but moved with a hive-like precision that suggested some form of collective consciousness. Their chitinous bodies were resistant to the few weapons the Asteri security forces possessed, and their plasma cutters sliced through Asteri architecture as if it were made of air. On the 4th day, as Ilara and the remaining council members prepared for their final stand, the sensors detected something new entering the system. "First Minister," the sensor operator called out, his voice betraying a mix of fear and hope. "Multiple vessels have just appeared at the system's edge. Configuration unknown." "The Vecron reinforcements?" Varric asked. "No, sir. These are different. Larger, much larger." The main display activated, showing the new arrivals. Even at this distance, Ilara could see that these ships were unlike anything in known space. Where the Vecron vessels were organic-looking, almost like flying insects themselves, these newcomers were angular, brutal in their geometric precision. They were black against the backdrop of space, absorbing rather than reflecting light, with only occasional lines of red energy pulsing along their hulls. "Receiving transmission," the communications officer announced. "Audio only." The voice that filled the chamber was deep, resonant, and utterly devoid of emotion, a voice that seemed designed to command rather than converse. "This is Warfleet Aegis of the United Earth Defense Force responding to Emergency Signal Alpha. We have received your distress call. Hostiles identified. Intervention protocol engage. Stand by for contact." The transmission cut off. "It's them," Ilara whispered. They came. On the display, the human ships, warships, unlike anything the peaceful Asteri had ever built, accelerated toward the planet. They moved with impossible speed, covering the vast distances between planets in minutes rather than days. The Vecron noticed the newcomers. Their fleet, which had been bombarding the planet's surface, began to reposition, clustering together in a defensive formation. A smart move against any normal enemy. But the humans were not normal. The lead human ship, a behemoth that dwarfed even the largest Vecron vessel, suddenly split open along its length, revealing what looked like a massive energy cannon running through its core. Light gathered at its center, building to an intensity that forced the Asteri to dim their screens. Energy readings off the scale, the sensor operator reported, voice shaking. "Whatever that weapon is." The human ship fired. A beam of concentrated energy, blindingly white with a core of blue so dark it was almost black, lanced out across space. It struck the center of the Vecron formation and continued through it, through them, through everything. Ship after ship simply ceased to exist, not exploding, not breaking apart, but disintegrating at the molecular level. In seconds, half the Vecron fleet was gone. The remaining Vecron ships scattered, attempting to flee or to find attack vectors. The human fleet didn't pursue. They didn't need to. Smaller craft began launching from the larger vessels, hundreds of them, then thousands. Fighter craft, each one moving with a precision that suggested either incredible pilots or, more likely, no pilots at all. The sky above Asteri Prime, which had been dark with Vecron ships for days, suddenly blazed with light as the greatest space battle in the planet's history unfolded above them. "They're destroying them," Varric said, his voice filled with awe and not a little fear. "The humans are actually winning." Ilara watched as ship after ship of the invading force was reduced to wreckage. The Vecron had seemed unstoppable, an elemental force of destruction. Against the humans, they looked disorganized, primitive, outclassed in every way. "First Minister," the communications officer interrupted. "We're receiving another transmission. Video this time." The main screen changed to show the interior of what must have been the command center of one of the human ships. Unlike the Asteri Council chamber with its organic curves and natural materials, this was a place of metal and purpose, illuminated by the harsh glow of holographic displays. At the center stood a human. Ilara had seen images of humans, of course, historical records, educational materials about the species that had once been part of galactic society. But seeing one live, in command of the forces that were saving her world, was something else entirely. The human was tall, with dark skin and close-cropped hair. The uniform they wore was black, with silver accents, bearing insignia Ilara didn't recognize. Their face was set in an expression that might have been carved from stone. "First Minister Ilara of the Asteri," the human said, their voice softer now but no less commanding. "I am Admiral Helena Reyes of the United Earth Defense Force. Your emergency signal has been received and authenticated. As per the Treaty of Sol, Article 7, Earth has responded to your distress call." Ilara found her voice. "Admiral Reyes, we thank you for your intervention. The Vecron have already destroyed much of our world. We feared all was lost." And throughout settled space, a new understanding emerged. Humanity had not disappeared because they were weak, or afraid, or declining. They had withdrawn because they recognized their own nature, a nature that made them the most dangerous species in known space, but also, when called upon, its most dedicated protectors. On Asteri Prime, as the last of the human forces prepared to withdraw, First Minister Ilara stood once more in the rebuilt council chamber. Beside her was Admiral Reyes, making her final inspection before departure. "You know," Ilara said quietly, "our historians always taught us that humanity was a paradox, a species of contradictions, warriors and poets, destroyers and creators. I think I understand now what that truly means." Reyes looked at her. "And what is that, First Minister?" "That day, when the Vecron were destroying our world, we called for mercy," Ilara said. "And you answered with war machines. But in doing so, you showed us the greatest mercy of all." For the first time, Admiral Reyes smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her severe features. "That, First Minister, might be the most human observation I've ever heard from a non-human species." As the human forces departed, leaving behind only a small diplomatic contingent and the promise to return if ever needed again, the Asteri looked to the stars with new eyes, no longer naive, but still hopeful. The galaxy was a dangerous place, but somewhere beyond the treaty boundaries waited humanity, terrible in their wrath, but magnificent in their mercy. And if darkness ever threatened again, they would answer the call.